Hi, this is Matthew. This is chapter 64 of His Redeeming Love, and I hope that this blesses you. This is called Yianni and Phil, my two friends, and this is just a chapter about Yianni and Phil. You would have heard of Yianni when I had my hospital breakdown and I was staying at Roselle. Yianni was my friend that came in and saw me and spent from about 9 o'clock in the morning to about 8 o'clock at night, about 11 hours a day with me. He went without lunch and he stayed with me all during my hospital visit. I remember in the parable of the sheep and the goats, Jesus says, commends those people that visited those people that were sick and were in hospital. And I have to share that people who go and visit people in hospital are very special to the people that are sick, and I was certainly sick and in a bad way in hospital. And Yianni made friends with the people that were in the psychiatric hospital and talked to them. And when I was at the toilet or at lunch, he'd talk to people and make friends with them and make them feel welcome and make them feel all right. Takes a pretty special friend to go into a psychiatric hospital and choose to willingly spend 11 hours a day at the hospital, spending time with your friend who is out of his mind, who's saying crazy things and silly things and stupid things, and to love him anyway. Yianni's always seemed to have loved me anyway, no matter what condition I was in and no matter what I was doing with my life. He seemed to love me. Yianni's a person who's suffered a lot of rejection in his life, and not many people seem to warm to Yianni and like him. And because he suffers a little bit from rejection, if you don't reject him, he seems to do things sometimes that will cause people to reject him. Though when you've got Jesus in your life and you've got a real Jesus that talks to you despite the false Jesus that gets me into trouble, the real Jesus told me to be a friend of Yianni's and stay close, and it was certainly warmed my heart to have Yianni at the hospital. I had all sorts of visions at the hospital and explained them to Yianni, and he just listened and didn't argue with the fact whether they were visions or not. I had a friend around that time. I wanted to get my book published, The Fallen Ones. I'd been sitting on the book for about 10 years and wanted to move towards getting it published. So Yianni said he had an eccentric sort of friend that was bipolar also like me, had the same mental illness as me, and he said that he was a good proofreader and editor, and I should be introduced to him. So he introduced us, and I got to know Phil as he proofread my book and showed me all the changes, and I typed in all the changes to change my book. I got my book finally to a position where I was going to self-publish it through CreateSpace that I published my books through, which is a company with Amazon. Jesus actually told me to throw the book away and that I could preach in the future or I could publish my book, but I couldn't do both, and that was a very big decision for me to throw my book away, especially since I'd just spent about $500 on Phil editing the book. I'd just spent all this money, and Jesus told me to throw the book away. But through the experience, I got to know Phil, and he became a friend. I started writing articles shortly after that, and which I'll talk about in a future chapter. And Phil started to proofread my articles, so there was less mistakes in them. I got to know Phil through the proofreading, and I got to know Phil as a friend, and I used to go around to his place and watch videos. And sometimes Phil was up at night, couldn't sleep, and he used to come around to my place, and we'd stay up all night and watch DVDs. I remember we liked Law and Order SVU, Special Victims Unit of Law and Order, and we got every series. I bought every series, and we used to watch Law and Order all night, and talk all night and have coffee all night. We'd have about 5 coffees overnight. Sometimes we used to drive into the city in Phil's car, and we'd have a meal in the middle of the city in an all-night restaurant, and it was called Pancakes at the Rocks, so we used to have pancakes and ice cream, and that was fun. It was fabulous times with Phil, and he loved to talk, and I loved to talk, and he heard from Jesus. Jesus used to speak to him, and he could answer my questions. Phil at one stage said to me that I'm not to question what Jesus has already told me with him, and I wasn't to use Phil to check what Jesus had told me, and Jesus told Phil that I was to be confident in what I was told by Jesus and not cross-check Jesus with Phil. Sometimes Jesus tells you things which are too hard for you to believe, and sometimes you want to check them out with another prophet. And Phil maintained that he wasn't a prophet, he just heard from Jesus and didn't have the gift of prophecy, although he was acting in the gift of prophecy, but we could never seem to agree on the fact that he was prophesying to me. But he just maintained that he had a telephone line to Jesus, and Jesus used to talk to him. So it was fun to have a friend that could stay up all night and could understand bipolar disorder. And when two bipolars get together, they're sort of close friends really fast, because they understand the depth of depression, and they understand the sadness of bipolar. They also understand the manic highs and being high and staying up for 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row and not having sleep. So me and Phil spent many nights together, all night, and very few of the nights Yianni spent with us. It was just mainly me and Phil. And he'd ring me up about 11 o'clock at night or 10, 11 o'clock at night and ask me if I was going to be up for the night. And if I was, he'd arrive an hour later with drinks and snacks to eat, and would stay up and talk and watch movies, and, as I said, go out for something to eat in the middle of the night. Phil seemed to always pay for the petrol. He didn't ever ask me for petrol money unless he was really short of money and I wanted to go out, and he'd say he'd need $5 for petrol, and I would give him that. But he never pressured me for money. He always seemed to be free with his money and share his money with me, buy snacks and all sorts of things. Phil was a very good friend to me. Yianni continued. I met Yianni in the city in 2000, year 2000, and I knew him all this time. Around this time, it was about 2002, and about 11 years ago now that I'm speaking from 2013. Yianni has always been a prophetic person, and he is a prophet of God. He could certainly do with some maturing like all of us could do, and Yianni simply needs some counselling and some healing to be done in his life. And yet he's a very loyal friend, and he also, with me, has been very free with his money. When I haven't had money, he's been the first to get out his wallet and pay for things. And if I had to pay Yianni for all the expenses that he'd spent on me, I'd be reaching the hundreds and hundreds of dollars, that possibly $500 that I'd have to pay him back if Yianni was a person who demanded things back. But Thankfully, he doesn't demand money back, and like myself, when he gives money, he gives the money and isn't loaning it. He doesn't use his money as a way of manipulating you or having power over you like some people do. And he's been a very good friend. So both Yianni and Phil, for a time, were good friends. And I hope that you understand a little bit about my life, a little bit more about my life, discussing them.